Greetings everyone, I am Iris V. Is the Obscura weapon series any good though? The Obscura series weapon series is a weapon series that covers spear, daggers, knuckles, katana, launcher, machine guns, rod, wand, and boots, and has the element of dark. Now I made this video to answer two questions. 1. Should you obtain a Obscura weapon series weapon? And 2. Should you upgrade said weapon? Well, I'll answer the first one first because it's a bit more nuanced than you'd think. Do I think you should pick up an Obscura weapon? Absolutely. I do think that you should pick up an Obscura weapon, and the pure reason for this is there may be use cases for them in the future. As we learnt when we got the Arms Refiner, we found out that the old elemental weapon series, so Frostal, Flamel, and Glycin, also got upgraded very heavily in combat power, but they were still at the previous level of power that required them, and on top of that, they just really scaled really well. But I'll have to get into the reason why elemental weapons are not used over other series. And the main reason that this is the case is because their attack power is too low for them to be currently viable. However, there are use cases where these weapons would outshine newer weapons. What are those? Let me explain. In the Alio and Retem purple battle tiers, there are enemies all weak to one element, either being ice or wind, and Gigantics that all have a large armor. Now here's the thing, you can actually go back and farm them out for a pretty expensive motion. And the main reason I bring this up is because we are getting level 60 soon. So what happens when we get the next limit break? In other words, that we can get our weapon from plus 50 to plus 60. Well, it's likely that these older weapons will get stronger, and they'll get closer to the new weapon. As of current, Frostal, Glycin, and Flamel are about 40 damage points behind Cinequem. Why is this significant? Because theoretically, these weapons have a much higher potency scaling, which means if content is outdated enough, the difference in defense would be minuscule enough that the raw potency from these weapons overtakes the output of the current weapons against older content. Not to mention, at level 60, our attack being straight up higher in general could actually cause this. And I'll use this analogy. Say your player attack at level 45 is 1000, and say your weapon attack is 400. The enemy's armor is exactly 1100. In this case, you'll lose 100 points of your weapon's attack power, so your weapon will be losing 25% of its damage. However, let's take the same weapon and level up 15 times. Say adding 10 points of damage per level, and I think this is reasonable. So now we're at 1550. Let's take away the 1100 points of armor again, and all of a sudden, the weapon's variance isn't actually making that big of a difference. And the lower the enemy armor, the bigger this gap becomes. Keep in mind, however, the damage gap between these two weapons, if I were to say add about 40 points of damage, which I'm going to scale up to 50 in this case, because that is more realistic because of the numbers I'm using, so you'd start with 1600 attack instead and be left with 500 attack, the weaker variant will be 10% less versus 25%, which, mind you, is way more reasonable to make up via the elemental weapons proc and potency bonus. Keeping this in mind, if you ever go back to previous content and try to farm out those motions in the next patch, I do recommend holding onto these weapons just in case for that reason. Although the next series that we are getting is a whole 100 damage points higher than what we have currently in the elemental weapon series. Its potency is fairly low, however, and 13% times 15% is about 30%. I am taking some liberty there because I'm completely ignoring the proc, so there could be the argument made that this weapon can compete, at least in those older situations. There may also be the case where adding an element down could make your solo run easier if hitting damage cap, but I don't think you're going to be hitting damage cap quite yet. But just food for thought. And as I said, the equip conditions of the Obscura is level 15, and it is fairly strong on its own, and is probably one of the better weapons to be using as a level weapon at level 15. Probably up until you can use a relic or Cinequem weapon actually. However, in that case, I am just speculating. Moving on to answering the next question, should you upgrade the Obscura series? For current content, no. You should not upgrade any weapon series at the moment unless you are trying to push the Geolab with Cuckoo Horror-Zap. These elemental weapon series are much weaker against armor than the current series that we have. And I cannot stress this enough. If you want a math breakdown for this, go to the video in the top right hand corner. Otherwise, I've been RSV, I hope you enjoyed my video, and I will see you next time.